Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Walter Dunson. I'm the Executive Director of Cardinal Reading Strategies. I'm the author of School Success for Kids with Dyslexia and Other Reading Difficulties. I'm an adjunct professor in the Graduate School of Education of a local university, and I'm on the Maryland State Department of Education Elementary Literacy Work Group. And I'm here today to ask you to support Senate Bill 638. We are presented with a unique opportunity, an opportunity to eliminate the disconnect between what we say and what we do. We say that our children are our greatest treasures. We say that they are our future. But those statements are not borne out in the actions that we take when it comes to teaching them how to read. Dr. Reed Lyon, formerly of NIH, says that reading is the gateway to all education, and without this skill, a student's occupational success is going to be limited indeed. How do we know this to be true? Burgeoning prison population as we see the decline in reading scores. Dr. Louisa Moats, that Barbara mentioned, says that a school's primary purpose is to teach a child how to read. Everything else pales in comparison, and we are not doing the job. Of the 50.2 million students that occupy our public schools, the National Association of Educational Progress tells us that 63% of all graduating seniors in the United States read below the proficient level. What that means is they are not decoding accurately, they are not decoding fluently, and they are not able to answer questions, basic questions about the text in which text that they read. What we are doing currently is not working, and to continue doing what is not working is educational malpractice at best. As an educational therapist, I routinely work with students who have been failed by our public school systems in terms of teaching them how to read. They come to people like me and others on this panel who understand structured literacy, and we teach them how to read. And yes, they ask, why didn't anyone tell me this before? And it's because the teachers themselves don't have these skills. As a professor, speaking of the teachers themselves, I see two types of students that come into my classroom. One is a working teacher. The other is a graduate student who is one or two classes away from becoming a working teacher. And what's interesting is, as my colleague just mentioned, they don't know what the National Reading Panel is. They have no idea that the National Reading Panel report has been available to us for the past 17 years. I want to let that sink in for a moment. 17 years we've had this information, and they still don't have it. I've heard many opponents talk about this bill, and they say things like, oh, it's too hard, or it's going to cost too much money. Well, there are a couple of critical points that my opponents or our opponents are not taking into consideration. One, English is composed of 8 different languages. Latin, Spanish, I won't list them all, okay? But 8 different languages give us our language, English. And the phonograms, or the letters and symbols that we use, come from different locations, so students are not going to know whether that CH says K, whether it says Ch, or whether it says Sh. In order to take the words in our language, they have to memorize them. And I want you to understand this. There are 180,000 words in the entire German language, 175,000 words in the entire Italian language. The latest edition of the English Oxford Dictionary has 1.7 million words. 1.7, and another 500,000 that are waiting to be categorized, mostly composed of Latin, Greek, or a combination of the two. We simply cannot have our students memorizing words. They must be taught how to decode. And in order for the students to know how to decode, the teachers themselves must know how to decode. I said before and I'll say again, you cannot pour from an empty cup. So if the teachers don't have these skills, then there's no wonder why our students are struggling. One last point. There are two components to reading. The first component is word identification, understanding the sequence and being able to string these sequences together to create a cogent word. Beyond word ID is concept imagery, and that's where you are pulling meaning from print. And if you are struggling with word ID, you either will never get to concept imagery, or by the time you get there, you're so tired that you don't care what you've read. Time and time again, we've had students, you ask them, well, tell me what you just read, and they'll push the book away and say, I don't know. I don't care, because they're frustrated. We need to remove that from the equation, and the way to do that is through Senate Bill 638. We have the power today to change the lives for close to 1 million children and adolescents in the state of Maryland. Thank you for your time.